being cheated here. If you need live captions, we have live captions. You can access them from your device by going to streamtext.net/player?event=CDA. So if you load that on your mobile phone, whatever, you can get the live captions for this particular event. Live captions for this event are provided by Alternative Communication Services. They're a local firm out of, I think, Lombard, western suburbs, but they actually handle events and they have clients from around the world. If you're having an event that would benefit from live captions, ASL interpreters, please contact them. You can visit them online at acscaptions.com. The captions are sponsored by another local company. You might have heard of them. We just renewed our sponsorship with them, and we're grateful. Without their sponsorship, there would be no live captions. Ergo, there would be no live stream for tonight. So that's a major impact for our meetup. I want to welcome a new organizer to our meetup, Karen Viado. Stand up, raise your hand. Something that she's going to be helping us with event planning for 2019. Looking very forward to having her participation. We also have Imelda March, who's one of the presenters tonight. She's going to be participating and organizing with our meetup event. Very happy to have you with us. We have a couple others. We have a couple others that we're sort of going through the process of onboarding, but you'll see a few more faces helping out with this particular meetup. We have some giveaways. I mean, what's a holiday event without a few little gifts, if you want to say? So after the presentations, we will have a quick giveaway of 2 books. One of them is the new book by Smashing Magazine called Form Design Patterns. We have 3 copies. If you don't win a copy and you would like your own copy, you can get a discount, a 25% discount, by using coupon code DESIGN, and that's all uppercase. And that 25% off discount is for Form Design Patterns, as well as Inclusive Design Patterns, a prior book. I think that for that book, only the ebook is available. The hard copy has sold out. The other giveaway we're giving out is a book by Rosenfeld Media called A Web for Everyone. This one's been out for a little while. It is like the go-to for UX folks. So definitely, we have 3 copies of that. If you are not lucky enough to win a copy of this book tonight, you can go out to rosenfeldmedia.com and use coupon code Lightning18DC20 for 20% off any purchases. That discount ends at the strike of midnight when we're saying Happy New Year. Okay? Our next meetup, next month, I'm very excited about this one. How many of you here attended Midwest UX this year? Raise your hand. Okay. Did you see her speak? Her present?
Did. It was really good.
What, it was okay. So hey, what's your name?
Kyle.
Kyle says it was really good.
It was really good.
Don't take it from me. Listen to Kyle, okay? I watched her presentation online, and I was just like, oh, we are so fortunate to have her speaking at our meetup. But in January 23rd, she'll be speaking about neurodiversity. We don't have the exact talk title up or the description. That will be announced about 2 weeks prior to January 23rd. But go ahead and pencil this in on your calendars for when we announce it. I'm pretty sure that this will reach capacity quickly. It's going to be hosted at Sprout Social, just so you're aware of where that's going to be in the downtown Chicago area. Looking towards the new year, we have it's odd. This is the first time in the years that we've been doing this that we have a year almost already firmed up as far as programming. However, with that said, all of this is tentative. All of this is, verbal agreements that, yeah, hey, we should do this. So with that said, take it with a grain of salt, but I'm very excited about some of the things we're going to be hosting in 2019. In February, Jared Smith, is anyone familiar with him? No. Is anyone familiar with WebAIM? Well, Jared Smith is WebAIM. And he's going to be coming here. I don't know exactly what he's going to be talking about, but he's already here in the city of Chicago, and he is graciously decided to present at our meetup. So look for that in February. May 16th, the third Thursday of every May, is Global Accessibility Awareness Day. So we'll be hosting an event for that. The last 2 years, we've had what basically is a panel discussion. The first year was a panel discussion. The second year was a speed dating event that was the same thing as the panel discussion. Very popular. Everyone loved it. Don't know what we're going to do this year. So we have a high mark to try to top. So look for that announcement coming sometime, probably the very beginning of May. In July, Heather Dowdy will be coming here to speak about Microsoft and accessibility. I can't remember her exact title, but she works for Microsoft in the accessibility group. And she's going to be here in town. She's going to be presenting on what Microsoft's doing with regards to accessibility. August. How many people attended the Derek Featherstone event in August? Raise your hand. Okay, a few. Derek speaks at our meetup almost every August because he's here for an event apart. But we also have Marcy Sutton. How many people are familiar with Marcy Sutton? Okay, so she's more of a developer and technical person. So we started thinking about how about an accessibility throwdown or something. So in August, look for some sort of interesting event around that. And then in September, hopefully, we will hold our second annual Accessibility Camp Chicago. How many people attended the camp this year? All right, and what did you think of it? I see thumbs up. Okay, cool, fantastic. Well, we hope to be better this year. So with that said, I wanted to share this site. This site sort of interested me, and I actually plan to follow it more closely when I'm on vacation starting next week. It's called 100 Days of ALLY, or accessibility. And the URL is 100daysofally.com. There is this individual. She's preparing to take her IAAP certification in Alaska. So the way she's handling it, she's basically writing a blog about her learnings and such. So for any of you who want to learn about accessibility, the foundation of it, I would definitely suggest that you go ahead and follow that particular website. Once again, 100daysofally.com. And there's this other article series. How many people are familiar with 24 Ways, the online advent calendar? Okay, I saw 2, 3. This is an advent calendar of sorts, but it's for accessibility. Myself and a couple others are the organizers of this, and basically every day, based on UTC time, so basically 6 p.m. Chicago time, a new article is posted, and it spans the range of technical, UX, legal. So we have a variety of different articles. If you're interested, please check that out. And with that said, Victor, if you want to come on up. We're going to start our lightning talk. So here's how this is going to work. We're not going to do Q&A after the talks. Basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to get through the talks in a lightning talk sort of fashion. So it's going to be boom, boom, boom. If you have questions for the speaker, please, there'll be plenty of time. Please speak to them on your own after their presentation. And then after the talks, we'll do the giveaway. So with that said, let me get to...
You've got it. Tab to the left of right there.
With that said, take it away. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. So Dennis started me off in the middle of my slide deck, so we're not going to do that.
Sorry.
Spoiler warning. So give me 1 second here. Get this presenting. Cool. Let's. Perfect. All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Victor, and I'm going to be talking about accessibility across your organization. So first, a quick intro about me. I work at PackBack. I am kind of our in-house accessibility specialist. My full role is front-end engineer and accessibility specialist. So at first, you might take that to mean I work on the web, I do a lot of accessibility work with websites. And you're not wrong. That's completely true. But I realized that to really help our customers and to push accessibility forward, I would actually have to work across our organization and get everyone on board. So this talk is going to be highlighting some of the learnings I have, how to work with different teams, and just some of the experiences I have. And before we get started, I set a timer for myself so that Dennis doesn't have to kick me off stage. We don't want to see that. So who is this for? So fundamentally, this is for people who care about accessibility. An educated guess tells me that's all of you. So I think you're in the right place. So this is for people who are accessibility advocates in an organization from any field. Whether you're in marketing, legal, web, any kind of place, if you're an advocate for accessibility in your organization, this is going to be directed to you. Now, this is also going to be for people who want to become accessibility advocates. If you're not in that role right now, but that's what you want to do, then also for you. And if you're interested in accessibility generally, this talk is also for you. So what are we going to cover? So I'm going to be talking about the role different teams play in accessibility and how to get teams implementing accessibility. Sounds pretty simple. What this doesn't cover, and this is the most important part, I will not explain to you how to get your team to want accessibility. If your team does not want to be accessible, that is really bad. Let's start there. But second, there's a lot smarter people who can explain the business value and how you can get people on board. I'm not going to be able to cover that. That is a talk in and of itself. And then the details of accessibility failures. So I'm going to assume you have some knowledge of accessibility. We're going to be talking pretty entry level, but I'm not going to dive into the details of WCAG and all of the accessibility specifications to explain those to you. I'm going to be mostly looking at high level, what do different teams care about? So let's get started. So the first and foremost thing that you need to do as an accessibility advocate is spread accessibility. So before we dive into the teams, before we dive into the specifics, this is like the main thing. If you want to be the accessibility advocate at your organization, then you need to be waking up every single day and saying, I want to push this organization forward in accessibility. Like I say, for accessibility to take off company-wide, you need to be an advocate and be able to talk to everyone. As someone says in open source, if someone isn't waking up every single day and thinking, this has to get done, it probably won't. So you need to take responsibility and push it forward in your organization. And it sounds like a lot, but trust me, you can all manage. So how do we help individual teams become accessible? Let's start with design. So design is one of the most crucial components of accessibility. There's Derek, who I think spoke on inclusive design. There's lots of different techniques around this. And one of your jobs might be, if your design team isn't super familiar with accessibility, how to get them on board and how to show them what accessibility really means. So at first, you have to train designers on common disabilities and common accessibility failures. If your designers don't know about the different disabilities that can affect your customers or just affect people in general, they won't know how to make those designs accommodating. And also common accessibility failures. Once designers get that feedback and you talk about contrast failures and looking at standard input mechanisms and all those fun things that WCAG details, that will really help them make accessible designs. And that means when you hand it off to a developer, you're cutting off a lot of the failures right from the get-go. And consider using a framework like inclusive design. Microsoft has pushed this in a whole different direction. They have a great set of materials on that. But inclusive design is really a great way to make your designers really, really inclusive and make sure accessibility is covered. Because fundamentally, if you test with people with disabilities, you're going to have a more accessible design. So up next, and this is my kind of like specialty, development. So you want to create fully accessible web pages, apps. I say web pages here, that's what I do. But you really need to get down and dirty and work on training. Lots of developers don't know much about accessibility. This isn't individual people's fault. It's just kind of how people have prioritized things over the long run. And we can work to fix that. So we need to train people, tell them about disabilities and accessibility failures, teach people about WCAG, all of those important things, and get people really on board and show them how to make accessible websites, products of all kinds. And the other thing is to bake accessibility into other stages like design and QA. Your developers aren't going to be able to catch all accessibility failures. They're not going to be able to make fully accessible products. I can tell you that myself. I know a great deal about accessibility, but there's failures I might not think of. I might not account for everything. So you need to make sure that at design, accessibility is included, and then you need to make sure to follow up on the development with accessible quality assurance. So let's dig into that next. So your quality assurance team can be one of your biggest strengths when it comes to maintaining accessibility. They can do a lot of great work in checking for accessibility failures and really looking out for people with disabilities and making sure they can use your site well. So how do we as accessibility advocates get them to do that? So we need to train QA staff on accessibility principles that they can spot during testing. Again, like designers, once people have the ideas in their heads about what common disabilities are and what are common accessibility failures, they're going to be looking for them. Once your QA staff knows to look for contrast failures, they'll say, let's analyze this text. Let's see if it meets the requirements that WCAG sets out for us. And then you can even dig in deeper. You can give them the specific accessibility failures, and you can have a lot of tools that help with that. So they can spot the individual WCAG failures and really give developers detailed feedback on features that might not be as accessible as they should be. And then finally, test using screen readers. This doesn't just apply to screen readers. Keyboard usage and other things also apply. But our QA team at PackBack, where I work, has started using screen readers, and that's really helped in QA catching accessibility issues. And that reinforces the knowledge that our designers and our developers have, but it also lets them really get a good understanding of why we're doing these things in the first place. Now, marketing. You might not think of marketing in terms of accessibility all the time, but really there's a lot that they can do. So marketing ties into design, because when you're creating marketing materials, you have to make sure that they're accessible. You have to make sure they're contrast compliant. You have to make sure that if it's a video, it's closed captioned, it's audio content, you have a text alternative, all of those important things. So in the same way, lots of social media platforms have great features for baking in accessibility into your content. So I've worked with our marketing team to make sure that they know how to use YouTube's closed caption feature to make sure all of our videos are captioned. And I've also worked with them to show them tools for checking contrast in their designs, marketing materials, and all the other fun promotional stuff that they do. So making sure that our marketing material is accessible ensures that when we're reaching out as a brand, we are putting our best foot forward. And now we've covered a good basic list of all the teams. I'm sure there's lots of teams in your organization. I probably haven't covered them all. But now that everyone knows about accessibility, what do we do next? Are we done? Not really. So you have to set clear rules and expectations around accessibility. Now this doesn't come down to you, it comes down to your teams and trusting them to put in place good guidelines. Our marketing team, for example, setting out the guideline that all of our videos should have closed captioning. When we're working on our website, we might set out that we want to make sure that we're fully WCAG 2.0, 2.1 AA compliant. So make sure that you have those rules that you all agree upon. And that way you can set that standard and make sure it's reinforced. And that's the main other point, holding everyone accountable. If you as an accessibility advocate spot an issue with marketing material or the product, then you have to point that out to people and you have to feel comfortable saying, hey, this isn't as accessible as it should be. We need to make sure that all of our customers can really work with this content and make sure that it reaches out to them. So that's about it. I really keep it to the lightning. And who am I to tell you this? So my name is Victor Kovis. I am a front-end engineer specializing in accessibility at PackBack. Now, what does that mean? I work with auditors on WCAG compliance. So they give us huge, ginormous spreadsheets of failures, warnings, and successes. And I work through parsing that data, putting those into our project management tools and making sure that we actually get those done and we become WCAG compliant. And I also work on getting all teams trained and onboarded with accessibility. So I've worked with our marketing team with captions, like I mentioned. I've worked with all of our different departments, design, everything, to make sure that everyone knows about accessibility and is prioritized as a core part of our product and our platform. So that is about it. I left room for questions. Dennis doesn't want me to do that, so I'm going to leave. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thank you. Yes, blame me for the questions thing. We have next. You know, I love my phone, but the fact that it doesn't keep the state that I had it in is. So, I'm sorry. Okay. Let me have you put that.
Does that work?
Yeah. And if you come back this way. Whoop, oops. Let's get your presentation up. That would help, right? I'm so challenged. There you go.
Thanks.
You can need it too.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? I feel like I can't hear myself. I'm Rachel Hyman. I'm an iOS developer at Sitter City, and I'm going to be talking a little bit today about implementing accessibility on iOS. So I'm sure this is a figure that's familiar to a lot of people, but I just wanted to call it out anyway. There are 1 in 5 people in the US with a disability. So what this means is, excuse me, that's 20% of people of your user base that can be taking advantage of accessibility improvements to your app or to your product. So to me, focusing on accessibility is about empathy for these people, for people who interact with the world in a way that may be different, but no less valid than you do. We're all here because we care about our users and their user experience. We want to make great products that make a difference in people's lives, and accessibility is part and parcel of that. So a lot of times when we talk about accessibility on iOS, we're talking about something called VoiceOver. VoiceOver is essentially a screen reader for the iOS system. It highlights different elements on the screen with that black rectangle up there and reads out a description of the element and its features. VoiceOver reaches elements on the screen through the UI accessibility protocol. So we're going to start by going through that. First up, you'll notice that this is an extension of NS objects. So you get conformance for free with all UIKit classes. The first property asks whether the element is an accessibility element. This will already be true for UIKit classes. In most cases, as with a custom control, you're going to want to set this to true. If you set it to false, the element will essentially be invisible to VoiceOver. So you want to avoid that whenever you can. Next up is accessibility label. This is a description of the element or its content. This should be a localized string. So I have this example here, example app here called refrigerator. It's a catalog of the beverages in my fridge. We're going to focus in on that yellow view in the top right that tells me how many favorites I have. So it's actually a button. If I tap on it, I can get to a view that shows me those favorites where I can edit them. So the accessibility label for that is just going to be favorites. Notice I didn't say favorites button. We'll get to that in a sec. Next up is accessibility traits. This is a bit mask, and here are some potential values for it. That's why you didn't want to put button in the accessibility label, because that can be indicated with the use of an accessibility trait. So it would be redundant to put it in the label. Note that here, UI accessibility trait button doesn't have to be synonymous with UI button. It can just be used to mean element that is tappable and causes a certain action to ensue. I use it all the time for table view cells, and I would use it for the favorites header in refrigerator. Next is accessibility value. This is used for values that change frequently. So you'd use it like for a slider or for the number of favorites in the favorites header. If you're keeping track of that value in a var, you can hang changes to the accessibility value on did set, which is really convenient. Last is accessibility hint. This is for if the combined values of the other properties don't adequately indicate what an element does. Make sure you don't put any essential information in this property, as hints can be turned off. So for our favorites header, the hint might be shows favorites, but that's kind of an artificial example. We don't really need a hint there. A better example is for the camera switcher button in the camera app. It might not be immediately obvious from the other values of the accessibility properties what this does. So the hint in this case would just be switches between cameras. So that altogether is the UI accessibility protocol. These properties are the building blocks of accessibility. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between label, value, and something you may have heard of called accessibility identifier. Accessibility label and accessibility value are members of the UI accessibility protocol. A label indicates what an element is or does, and value is essentially state, so it indicates something that's going to be changing frequently. Accessibility identifier is something different. It's used for UI automation testing, so you can put whatever you want in there. It's not a user-facing string. It doesn't have to be localized. So the converse of this is please not put testing strings in accessibility label, because the system is going to read that out to the user. And if it reads something like button 1, that makes for a really bad user experience for people that are depending on that information. Consider flow and discoverability in your app. VoiceOver users are swiping between elements, and they might not see things on the screen in the same order that a fully sighted user would. There's something really useful for this called accessibility containers, where you essentially give the system a frame and tell it what elements are in that frame, and it'll group them all together and read out all the descriptions as one. If you're using navigation bars, try to use titles wherever you can. This is one of the first things that VoiceOver reads off when it gets to a new screen, and it'll make that transition clear to the user where it might not otherwise be obvious. This is also good for all of your users because it makes the hierarchy of the app subtly clear. So you can't understand what you have to do to improve your app for accessibility until you understand where it stands. And for this, Xcode provides a really handy tool called Accessibility Inspector. So you set the target, whether it's the simulator or your phone, and there's a really handy button here called Run Audit. So if we run the audit for the refrigerator app, we get a whole host of issues. These range from contrast being insufficient to hit areas being too small to insufficient description labels to dynamic type, which we'll get to in a sec, not being supported. This is a really great way to get the low-hanging fruit in your app, but I encourage you to just do it. Take your app for a spin using VoiceOver, and you'll quickly discover areas that don't make sense to the user or are hard to navigate. So for instance, say we added this category view to the bottom of the cells in the refrigerator app. Without any special treatment, VoiceOver is just going to read off those labels as soda, juice, without actually indicating which one is selected. So that's not the kind of thing that the accessibility inspector audit is going to catch, but it would be immediately obvious if you were running through the app yourself. I encourage you to set up an accessibility shortcut, which will let you toggle VoiceOver on and off with a triple click of the home button or the side button. You can do this through settings. It's much easier than trying to navigate back into settings when you have VoiceOver on. I also encourage you to use something called Screen Curtain, which blacks the screen out, but keeps the app and the system entirely operational. The magic number here is 3. When you have VoiceOver on, tap the screen 3 times with 3 fingers. So why would you want to black the screen out? Well, the reason it sort of gets at what I was talking about before, where VoiceOver users are swiping between elements. So it's going to better simulate the experience of someone that's unfamiliar with your app and navigating it with VoiceOver for the first time. So switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about something else, which is called dynamic type. So with dynamic type, this refers to text that resizes as the user bumps up or decreases text size in their settings. So normally a designer hands you some specs, you have something that says a label should be at 17 points, and it will stay that no matter what the settings are. With dynamic type, you have these various styles that indicate size relative to one another. So when the user bumps up font size in their settings, labels with these styles will grow while staying about the same relative to one another. This allows you to preserve information hierarchy in your app. Dynamic type is super important. If I had to hazard a guess, I'd say there are more people using non-standard font sizes than VoiceOver. I look over on the train and see large text on people's iPhones all the time. I found that the best way to incorporate dynamic type is to get your designers on board. Start with a low-effort screen like settings and have them provide you specs that are annotated with dynamic type styles instead of static point sizes. The human interface guidelines include this really handy chart that translates between dynamic type styles and point size for each different font setting. Give this to your designers. It'll help them figure out the appropriate styles to annotate with. And try to avoid putting explicit width and height constraints on labels to allow them to grow. This has the benefit of preparing your app well for localization. So a super long German word will be accommodated by labels that expect to grow, whether it's through font size or through actual text. So the accessibility inspector comes in handy here again. There's a tool on the right there that lets you see how your app reacts to different dynamic type settings. One thing to realize here is that it's not always going to be a bigger font size. Users may have smaller sizes set in order to fit more content on the screen. So make sure you're testing how your app reacts at those smaller sizes as well. Make sure you're checking the automatically adjust font box in IB. This has the benefit of if the user goes out to settings and changes their font size and bounces back into your app, it'll automatically adjust those labels instead of the user having to restart the app. One resource I wanted to mention here is called AppleViz. This is a website that tracks bugs in Apple products and software for blind and low vision users. So it's really cool. People are very sort of complete in the bugs that they're finding. So I would suggest checking it out to get an idea of the kind of issues that VoiceOver users are running into. And finally, that brings me to this question. Why should we care? Isn't this basically putting in a lot of effort for not a lot of payoff? To that, I have two answers. First of all, caring about accessibility makes for better apps for everyone. That was kind of a thread running through this presentation. With dynamic type and with setting titles on screens, it helps situate people in the app, not just accessibility feature users, but just your general user population as well. And secondly, and more importantly, accessibility for me is fundamentally about empathy. That figure I cited at the beginning, that 1 in 5 people in the US have a disability, that's 20% of people that improved accessibility could make a world of difference to. Accessibility is about leveling the playing field for all of your users. The point of this isn't to shame anybody for not having put accessibility in their product. Rather, it's to emphasize the importance of it and to point out how many avenues there are to begin integrating accessibility into your app. It's not an intractable problem. It's something you can begin doing today, and every little bit helps. You can't always wait to be handed requirements for accessibility. Sometimes you have to be the evangelist, and hopefully this little talk has set you on that path. You can help write the playbook for your company when it comes to accessibility. So, takeaways. First, use accessibility auditing and actual testing with VoiceOver to improve accessibility in your app for visually impaired users. Make use of accessibility shortcuts and screen curtain to simulate the actual experience of a non-sighted user. Second, get your designers on board and start integrating dynamic type. Tons of people have the font size bumped up in their settings and will appreciate your compliant app. Third and last, practice empathy for your users. Not everyone interacts with the world the same way, but everyone should be able to use your app or your product in their own way. That's just good business sense and good empathy as well. Thanks.
All these compassion. Thank you so much. Up next. Let's get you.
Yeah, that's good.
So we good then?
Yep.
Here's your-
Where can I click? This one or?
So all you have to do is just hit this button
Okay,
and it'll advance it.
perfect.
Okay, you ready?
Yep. Hello, everyone. Oh, we are getting food. Well, my name is Imelda March. I am a newly minted UX designer, and one of my interests lies in information architecture, because I used to work for a cycling publication, and all I did was take pictures, edit pictures, and write an interview. Also, Olympians who are probably you saw them on TV on the last Olympics. Anyways, my presentation is mainly taking you down the road of accessibility. I am new to this, learning, just like many of you here in the audience. So I'm just going to take you down a little bit down memory lane. The first caption came on television in 1970. I didn't know that. I found out today, a few days ago as well. I became more, but before I continue, I have a question for you. Raise your hand and tell me how many of you watch videos with captions on? Great. You'll be happy to find out that 85% of you users do that through Facebook. Actual stats here. So once again, I'll just take you down memory lane. In 1970 was the first time that caption appeared on television. That would be black and white television for some of you who don't know that there was such a thing. In 1982, there was a National Caption Institute that developed real-time captioning for television. In 1990, the passage of the Television Decoder Circuit Act. And what that is really all manufacturers in the United States had to manufacture the television with a remote control that allowed anyone with any type of user impaired, either hearing or also oral communications, be able to program their box or cable to be able to take part in any programming on television. And in 2010, the First Century Communication and Video Accessibility Act. And all that means is that all the laws and regulations that were out there were upgraded in 2010 to go along with all the new media that were coming on board at the time. And these are still ongoing things that are going on. And lastly, in 2012, the FCC establishing closed captions for all type of television. So I'm sure you were all watching on Sunday when the Chicago Bears had an amazing game. Any of you had closed captions on? Well, I did, only because I wanted to see whether or not they were really the transmission of that programming was really keeping up with all the announcers, and it was pretty close. One of the other things I wanted to kind of enlighten you with, that there are 3 organizations that actually moderate all these captioning and all the type of accessibility requirements that are out there. And as you are designers, marketers, and also salespeople, you will be considering this before you even think of anything. When you're thinking about your marketing campaign, as our first speaker mentioned, you will be talking to your other staff members and talking about what type of accessibility frameworks you'll be inserting in your programming. So we have the CVAA, the FCC, and the ADA. And here will be a little bit more broadly explained in my graphic of telling you what each one of them does. The first one is the, as I mentioned, the Communication Video Act, which also covers all web videos that you see through streaming, and also television, media, and also movie and trailer clips. And then also the oldest of them all, FCC, which, the Oscars and other awards that are coming up. they'll be watching very closely what those presenters says, because they can get fined for saying things that are not really up for family time, right? And last and not least, the ADA, the American Disabilities Act, that really hones on the online services that are provided through government. So one of the things I wanted to highlight in this is that any organization that accepts government funding must, number one, be following the FCC and the ADA. Many of them will have video access, and then that's when the First Century Video Act will come into place. But FCC and ADA are principally in many of the things that many users will have access to today. One of the ways to create the quality in any of the productions that you may have is to ensure that, as was mentioned by our speaker number one, is that you are talking to all your staffing involved to ensure that these considerations are plain in sight and they're developed up front. Just like any type of construction, when you see they clear out the area, then they come up with the bricks and mortars and everything that goes. This is kind of the foundation. Foundation accessibility is always going to be first as we move along to ensure that all users are included in your programming. And one of the other things, as I mentioned earlier, 80% of individuals watch videos using captioning, because you may be in a meeting, not paying attention to the boss, right? You may be watching the football game or the hockey game or any other programming that you are, but you are watching it with captions. So in summary, captions help bring all your users in on not only captions, but any type of mechanism that allows other users to participate in your programming. And last but not least, caption early and often. Yes, you may think as you are planning things, oh my God, I have to look at my HTML. Oh my God, I have to look at the color and the contrast. But all these things are important because maybe you're good today, like we are all perhaps are operating under what we would say usual and customary procedures, but maybe later you may have some type of disability that you may need captions, or you may need that screen reader or any type of oral communications through your device. Last but not least, here's my information. If you want to contact me later, you can. These are the hashtags that we're using today. And once again, my name is Imelda March. I'm a UX designer.
One thing I'll say is food is here. So if anyone wants a few sliders and fries, please help yourself. Also, please try to limit yourself to 2, since we seem to be slowly but surely running out. So please limit yourself to 2, but go ahead and grab yourself a slider and some fries. Up next, I'm not sure first name.
Dheeraj.
Viraj.
Dheeraj. I got it.
I can barely say my own name. Just so everyone knows, on April 1st, when I go to Starbucks, I typically just tell them Bertha and just to watch what happens. Because typically they call me Denise anyway, so whatever. So of course, come off full screen to go to the browser to show these demos.
Yes, and escape to go everything.
Escape to get out of this, or just click and slideshow.
Okay, sure.
Okay. I know.
I don't need this.
Fantastic. Good luck.
Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Dheeraj Indurti speaking. Today I'll be talking about focus management By focus, I mean how I'm a developer. Let's go with that first. I'm a developer. I'm a front-end developer. I've been developer for like over 6 years now, and have been accessibility developer / consultant like for over 4 years now. I've worked with different companies, two of them being financial companies, and one of them retail. They were all having accessibility in them, so I got to experience like different projects. That's what I'm going to say. And focus management. Focus management is like managing focus, to be simple, but managing focus in a web page. All right, managing focus in a web page, so people are not confused. People are not lost when they are going to a new web page. Maybe the website you work on, you're familiar with, and you're like very comfortable going around. You know where everything is. But just imagine a person who just came and saw that, and especially a person who doesn't even know what's going on. Like, for example, language-wise, like foreigner who's a different language person looking at an English website that's in English, for example. Focus will help. It might not help 100%, but it will definitely help. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Some of the, like, this is a very huge topic, so I try to cover, since I've been developing accessibility for 4 years now, I've been working with different kinds of developers and designers. So I try to gather the most common and most commonly made mistakes, or most commonly the misunderstandings we had between each other, and like sometimes what you understand is what not they mean. So like just misunderstandings, to keep it simple. So these are the ones. Obviously the main thing, why do we need to do that? I'm going to cover that. And some of the developer perspective stuff are tab index. You might have known the HTML attribute tab index. And tab versus arrow keys, like why should we even care about using tab key and arrow key? These are the keyboard, tab and arrow keys are on your keyboard. You can notice that if you see. And dynamic content. Dynamic content is like when some content shows up on a website as a result of an action. Getting into that, oops, sorry. Like I said earlier, like why do we need to manage focus? It's just preserve meaning and operability when user navigates the web page. Like there are different kinds of apps. There's a single page application, and there is a application which just has multiple different pages and stuff. So we need to preserve the meaning. We just don't want people to get lost. Say, for example, a banking website. If a person is trying to compare credit cards or open a credit card account, they could get angry at one point and just leave, go to some other place where it's easier to look into different credit cards and get that credit card. So we want to make life easier to everybody. So and we want to preserve the meaning while we are doing that. So that's the main thing. How is it possible? Like getting into developer details at this point, how is that possible? How is managing focus possible? Is by pointing the location. Like for example, when you go to a new page, how should I keep this? Like say for example, the user doesn't have a mouse. For example, is using only keyboard. The user is just using the keyboard, and when the user goes to a new page, the user wants to know, because if it's a mouse, you can just take your mouse and point it like it's like touchscreen, more or less. Whereas if it's only keyboard, you want to tell the user where the focus is, so the user knows which keys on the keyboard to use to get to the next place on that specific page. That's called pointing the location. By changing the appearance, yes, you'll point to the location. That's fine. But how does user know it's actually located? The focus is located. Browser focus by default, for example, Firefox and even Chrome, they have a blue ring. Like for example, if the focus is on a button, when you go to a new page, the button has a border of like blue color border. So you can change that. Web styling, you can use web styling to change that and change the appearance of that place, so it's like obviously visible. Yes, if you spend 5 minutes and search in the page, you can find it, yes. But how about finding it in the first 3 seconds? How does that sound? So that's the changing appearance point. Yeah, like the key point, which group of users are we targeting? Keyboard only users or screen reader only users? Like keyboard only, like I said, people who cannot use a mouse or who don't want to use a mouse or who don't have a mouse, whatever. Or screen reader only users. Screen reader only users are mostly like people without sight, mostly, who can only hear, because screen reader is mostly for hearing, kind of. At least that's what I saw so far. I mean, not necessarily that, but screen reader only users. Those are our target users in here. Coming to the tab index topic. Tab index is a attribute, HTML attribute, web development attribute. It like the direct, like the tab key on the keyboard. This tab index is directly controlled by that key, or vice versa. When I say you can dictate the tab order, but you can also avoid it. I mean to say that yes, you can. Like for example, you have a button and a input in a web page. You can actually have tab index 1, tab index 2, so that whenever you're pressing the tab key, the focus goes to different element on the page, and then like 1 and 2 in the same order. You can do that, but you should not do that. That's what I mean to say that. You can do that, but you should not do that. That's like a bad practice. Like if you are happening to do that, then that means like if you're trying to put like there's a element 1 and element 2, but you want to go for make the focus go to element 2 first, just why don't you just put this on the top? Simple. Proper structuring of the page. That's what I mean to say here. Never use web styling to position your elements. Same thing again, pretty much same thing. Web styling, like there are multiple like web styling as in CSS, if anybody's, most of you are familiar, I'm assuming. Web styling, like if you use CSS to position the elements, then like you use like whatever you see on the page is not what it actually is in the background. Like whatever you see on the page is not what actually coded there, because you use CSS. CSS is not HTML. HTML is the thing that controls the structure of the page. Like I said, developer language here. It's like structure of the web page is not same as structure in DOM. Like if you're familiar with DOM, that's like when you inspect in a browser, that's the structure you see in the back, the code. Like you can see again, like let's take the same example here. You have a button. You have a right now. You have a button on the top, input at the bottom, but you are using CSS styling to make the input go on the top, because in a form, like generally you put your name and hit submit, right? So, but that's not on the web page. That's not on the HTML. That's what not you coded. You coded in such a way that the button is on the top and the input is at the bottom, but you use CSS. I mean, like, why? Why do you want to do that? Why can't you just put the input on the top and button at the bottom? So, like, I'm trying to say that if you structure your web page properly, number one, you don't have to use styling to position the elements, specifically position. I'm not talking about border. I'm not talking about background. I'm saying position. Because, like, again, the whole point of focus management is to preserve meaning and make it easy for the user to operate it. So structure the page properly, so the work for you will be less and the work for a person who is actually using the website will be less. Feel free to use tab index 0. I know I said you should not use tab indexes, but sometimes you'll have situations where you'll have to use some HTML elements to be focusable. Not all HTML elements are focusable by default. Your browser focus does not work on all HTML elements. I'm saying this out of experience. So you can put tab index 0. Do not put 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, but just put tab index 0. That'll just get focus onto it. And the focus order on your web page still remains the same. The default focus order still remains the same. It won't get disturbed. If you put 1 or 2, then you'll have some extra work to do. Don't do that, please. That's it with that point. Next one, tab versus arrow keys. This is a very, again, this is a, sorry. This is a very huge topic as well. I'm going to just cover some of the, actually, one of the main thing I handle at present and as part of my project, tab versus arrow keys. This one specifically is to maintain meaningful sequences, meaningful sequence while the user is operating the web page. So you don't want to confuse the user. You want to say a user, a group of items in a web page, some of the items in the web page are to be seen as a group than individual items. Like actually, let's go with the example. Here, like we have 3 checkboxes. Like for example, while filling a form on a whatever website, they'll ask you multiple questions while filling a form. So whenever, like again, this one is specifically targeting users with screen readers. I know for when you look at it, it doesn't make too much difference, but just close your eyes and see what's going on with the screen reader. Like let's listen to the screen reader. It'll just try to say you whenever you enter the widget 1, for example, it has 3 checkboxes which are interrelated to each other. So it'll just tell you that you'll provide appropriate ARIA tags to make much more meaning. But in this case, I'm just going to say it. So like you're trying to say to the user that those 3 checkboxes in that little flowchart there, they belong to each other. So before you exit that widget, before you focus out of that widget, please look at all the three items in that widget. And actually, you'll also disable the tab key from there. You'll force them to use arrow key. That way, they will have to go through all 3 of them. And if you put a tab key, yes, they can choose to get out of it as well. If you get a tab key, it will not go to the second checkbox, but it'll go to the second widget completely. So they're going to skip the whole thing. So you're saying tab will get you out of it. Arrow keys will let you stay in it and look around to explore what other options are there in that specific area. Like I said, widgets versus items. Tab key functions only while moving from widgets, but arrow key functions while inside a widget. So like another best example is calendars, for example. If you want to navigate through different days in the calendar, you don't want to enable tab key. If you're programming a calendar widget, you have to use only arrow keys to go from different days in the month. Whereas if you hit a tab, it basically goes out of the calendar to the next available item in the form, say input, whatever it is. It'll just get out of that. I have an example. I'll show it at the end. Dynamic content to preserve the meaningful sequence. Again, let's consider a banking website here. It's basically notifying the user the reaction of their action. Basically, for example, say a user hit a button, then the most common example everywhere is a model pop-up, like a dialog box that shows up suddenly. Again, please close your eyes and put on a screen reader and see, will you know that a little dialog just popped up? No. If you're looking at it, yes, something popped up. But just close your eyes and try to find how do you know that a dialog popped up. This can be done by focus management. That's the dynamic content I'm referring here. Notify the user about the reaction that occurred as a result of their action. How do you notify them? By focusing the dynamic part. Like if it's a model like a dialog box, you'll make the focus go there using JavaScript, using CSS, whatever you want to do. Just make the focus go there, and the screen reader automatically picks it up. The screen reader will actually read it out. And keyboard navigation, because right now they click the button, and if the focus went there, the next time they click a tab key, for example, it will get out of there. They know that their focus is there right now. They need to focus at that part which just showed up. Dynamic content again. Users can see where the focus is now, and also the screen reader reads out the location of the user for those users who cannot see. Like I said, the example of this situation are pop-up and modal dialog. I have a example for that as well. And there is one exception to this. It's sometimes you cannot make the focus go there, and we have appropriate ARIA tags for that. I don't want to talk much about it. I just want to mention the exception. I'll show you the examples right now. I see that. Okay, so thank you. This is the example for tab versus arrow key. So right now, I mean to say here that when I click this button, I'll see something. And if you see, my focus automatically went to the first item that showed up as a result of my action. And if I don't have screen reader open, but it's a screen reader will technically read out this whatever text is in there. Like right now, I'm using the down arrow key, and I'm still using down arrow key, and it's not going anywhere. And up arrow key, it's just staying the same. So this now, right now, if I hit a tab key, it goes to the next item. So like, I mean to say that when you're inside something, disable the tab keys. Use, like I said, I'm using a JavaScript to disable the tab keys and enable the arrow keys only when I'm in that little list. I'm also changing the appearance, if you noticed. Like I'm trying to make it too bright here, but yeah, I mean, you don't have to make it like so much of contrast between focused and non-focused items, but something much more different than a browser default. Like the browser default here is a blue ring. You can also see there, but this one is for that, and this is for the dynamic content. Like I said in the slides, like the example is this one. The moment I hit this button, the focus is going, in this case, if you see the blue ring on the heading, that's where my focus is going. What happens is the screen reader immediately reads out saying that, it reads out that it first says that name of the dialogue, if you have any name for this dialogue pop-up, and it'll also read out the heading immediately. So this is like I'm saying, I mean, I picked these examples because these were the more common examples which we had to redo and people were confused. You know, the simple ones are more confusing. So we had like multiple iterations. That's why I picked these examples. If anybody wants to know like anything about accessibility, like how to test it, how to actually write it, how to implement it, like literally like coding wise, feel free to contact me. And thank you very much.
Okay, we are about to hear from our last speaker in 2018. I'm feeling a little melancholy, I guess. That last presentation, those URLs, we'll go ahead and post those on the Meetup site, so this way you can take a look at the code and such and the examples. Okay, so we need to put that on. Just put it anywhere in the center.
All right.
And do to advance. You
Okay.
put that and you're all set.
Thank you. All right. Hey, y'all. My name is Michelle Ann Lee, and tonight I'm going to be talking to you about designing accessible sign-up forms. All right, so I know it's late. It's the last talk of the night, and it's cold and dark outside. So y'all might be wondering, who is this chick I have to listen to for the next 15 minutes? I'm a designer, a developer, and an accessibility crusader. I inserted myself into a scene from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. This is my husband. He lost his right leg in a motorcycle accident, so he wears a prosthetic. And accessibility is something that we always factor in when making travel plans. We were recently looking to plan a trip with some friends who have children. So I visited a travel website that specializes in kid-friendly property rentals. It's aimed at families, and it has global destinations, so we can assume a global audience. Here's their homepage. It's really fun, it's really colorful, and it's been featured in some cool lifestyle blogs. However, once I tried to sign up to create an account so I could book a rental, I started to notice some really glaring accessibility issues, and I thought it would be an interesting design exercise to reimagine their user flow. Now, to be clear, this company has no idea who I am. They did not pay me to do this, but I really believe that by focusing on common design patterns and making them really accessible, we can have an outsized impact on users with disabilities. All right, so let's take a look at what's not accessible about this site, starting with the homepage. So for starters, none of the links have a focus state. And it would be really great if there was a skip to main link for users who are tabbing through the site so they could skip over the navigation when they need to. All right, so to create an account, you click on the sign up link in the main navigation, and you get this window pops up. And at the top of the window, there's a link to sign up with Facebook. Then we have a form to sign up with email. And below that, if you already have an account, there's a link to log in. So let's say you already have an account. If you're tabbing through the site, you have to tab through this entire form to get to that login link. And the contrast is way too low. I could barely read it with my glasses on. Also, just want to note the text on the right in all caps, those are labels, but the text on the left is placeholder text, which means that it disappears when users start typing. So let's say someone starts typing their password and maybe they have a cognitive disability, maybe they're just distracted, and they forget that it's supposed to be 7 or more characters. So let's say they enter like a 6-character password. They are, sorry. That was out of order. So they are then taken to this page that has, again, a link to sign up with Facebook and header 1 that says oops, and then there's the errors listed below that, and the related input in which the error was made was highlighted. So this Facebook sign up has a really odd placement. A screen reader would read that first, it's first on the page, and it's not that important in the hierarchy. It is nice that this header 1 makes it really clear what the intent of the page is. When you get to this page, you know that something went wrong. And I like that errors are listed at the top of the page. However, it would be really nice if the errors linked to the related inputs, especially if this was a very long form and you would have to do a lot of scrolling or searching to find where you made the mistake. And the error text contrast is way too low. This is red on pink. It's very difficult to read. All right, so let's say you get this form corrected, you submit it, you are then taken back to the home page, and there's this blue bar at the top of the page that has a link to encourage you to update your details. And at this point, it's really not clear whether you've successfully signed up. This blue bar is easy to overlook. I honestly overlooked it when I was signing up. And the text contrast within this blue bar is too low. So this is kind of like that metaphor you sometimes hear in the accessibility community of taking someone out on a date and leaving them in a field. We don't know how we got here or where to go next. All right, so let's take a look at the redesign. All right, so we're going to start, let's assume that you've clicked the sign up link, and in the main navigation, what happens next? This window pops up, but now this window has only 3 options. So we've got a sign up with Facebook and sign up with email and log in. So having only 3 options means that you only have to tap a maximum of 3 times now in order to get to the option that meets your needs. You're no longer tabbing through entire forms, as is in the original website. Want to note a couple things in the code. So these icons within the buttons, this Facebook and email icon, these have an ARIA hidden attribute because they're purely decorative. And this X icon is an SVG at the top right of the pop-up. It has a title attribute as well as some hidden text to make sure that assistive technology understands that you click that in order to close the window. The purpose is really evident for users who wouldn't see it and understand that that's what the X means. All right, so you click on sign up with email. You're taken to this page next. It's create an account. There's a form that you can fill out. And let's just walk through this form and the changes that I made in order to make it more accessible. So first off, all the form elements have a focus state. This first field is in its focus state. It's highlighted in yellow. It's hard to see in this presenter, but there's a bit of a drop shadow on it. The field's a bit lighter. All of these form fields have labels. Now, I styled them within the form field, so they sort of look like placeholder text. But as you can see with the first field, when you click into it, the label moves above the text that you're typing. So you can still see it as you go. Required fields have asterisks, so you can visually see they're required. But in the markup, there's also a required attribute and some visually hidden text. Just again, making sure that assistive technologies understand the things that are being presented visually. All right, so if we move down to the password fields, third from the top, there is a little link that says show on the right, and you can click that to reveal the password. So this is great for users with cognitive disabilities, users with maybe some mobility issues who are having trouble entering their password as intended, or people who are just, busy. I think we've all forgotten our password. Moving down from there, there's a request that you verify your birthday in order to prove that you're 18 years old or older. So this wasn't part of the original form, but I was doing some competitive analysis, looking to see what other similar services are doing, and it's a common thing to ask people to verify their age. You could certainly do some A/B testing to see if it's better to have them check a box to verify, etc. But I thought it would be interesting to explore this particular design pattern of entering your birthday. So, that got me thinking about date inputs, and my first instinct was to say, okay, people can just type out the date of their birthday, but date formats are not universal, and people are often mislabels that tell them how to input information. Just to give you an example, my husband grew up in Europe. He likes to use European date formats, which are day, month, year. And I grew up in Texas, so I always say month, day, year. And for this reason, I have forgotten his birthday just like so many times. He does not love that. Also, anniversaries, it's awful. Anyway, so I wanted to have the user select the month, the day, and the year. And even if, they were kind of half paying attention and just hit the drop-down arrow for the select, they would still see amongst the options, that there are months listed or days, or the days that are in a typical calendar month, etc. So that would help them understand how to input the information as intended. And then finally, with the checkbox at the bottom, one more thing I want to note is that all of these form elements meet WCAG 2.1 contrast requirements. This is not specified by Section 508, which is currently tied to WCAG 2.0, but I think it's a really great new addition to WCAG 2.1 because it says that for non-text content that's really essential to understanding the meaning of the page, you want to meet minimum contrast requirements, so it's really visible and easy to see. All right, so let's say you're entering content, you're entering your information, and how can we tell users that they've made a mistake? And also, how can we validate that they've correctly input information? I didn't love the pattern of filling out a whole form and then submitting it and then having to go back and check through errors. I think that's a lot of cognitive load. So I reimagined this using dynamic validation to provide immediate feedback as you're filling out the form. So what this would look like is when you enter the information correctly, a green check appears next to that field. And if you've entered it incorrectly, a red X appears. And what you'd probably want to do is have some kind of oral alerts to notify assistive technologies that some new information is appearing on the page. These icons they're large, they're very visible. They meet contrast requirements, and even though they're red and green, which would not be great for users with red-green color blindness, you don't want to be relying on color alone to convey information, they're distinct enough from one another that it's very clear which is which. And also, we have the error messages appearing right next to the fields in question. So you can get immediate feedback right there that helps you understand how to correct the error. You're not searching for where the field is, and you've got the errors on the top. All right, so let's say you get this all corrected, everything's great, you submit it, and then you're taken to the success confirmation page. And it says success at the top, so you know that you have signed up for this service. There's also some suggestions that you could update your profile or start browsing home. So again, we're not leaving our dates out in a field. They don't know where to go. We got them home on time within curfew and gave them our phone number. All right. So I just want to note that all of these considerations follow best practices, but you absolutely want to be testing your work with users with disabilities. That is the best way to validate if it is truly accessible. And I have a question slide, but feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from any of y'all. Thank you.
Then I can take the lapel.
Oh, good. It's so cool. It's such a great accessory.
I know. Exactly. Stylish. All right. Okay. So what we have left is the book giveaway. Now, for anyone who's been a member of this meetup for some time, we seemingly struggle at creative ways of giving away these freebies, if you want to say. So we've attempted to do something creative. However, we ran out of time. So here's the thing. We have 6 books, 3 of each type of book. We have 7 questions and answers. So y'all going to have to get these right, okay? Because we're going to run out, okay? So basically, this is going to follow the format of something you might have heard of, Jeopardy. So what I want you to ignore are these last 3 rows and that 300 and that 300, because we don't have questions and answers for that. We're well prepared. So these are in categories of coder, so a developer type question, design or UX type question, or a general accessibility question. And to be honest, these are not, where you got to start Googling, hopefully, because we really actually do just want to get rid of these bugs. But we want to do it in possibly a way where someone might just walk away and say, hey, I didn't know that. So with that said, who wants to play? Raise your hands. Okay, Liz, I'm picking on you first. Which category would you like?
Design and UX for 200.
Aren't you supposed to go in order? 100, 200, isn't it? Okay, no. Now be honest, I don't watch Jeopardy. I haven't watched it in 40 years. So with that said, what category would you like?
Design UX
For 100.
100. Do you have some order that you have to go in? Like,
isn't it where you step? All right. Just to make y'all happy, 200. Here we go. This aspect of design should never be solely relied on. Your answer. Yes?
Visual design.
What aspect of design?
Color.
Ding, ding, ding. We'll allow audience contributions here. Which book would you like? Form design or web for everyone? All right. Everyone give a round of applause for Liz. All right. Raise the hands. Who wants to play? I was going to pick you right away. It's like, oh no, now I get look down. You. What category? I guess it would help, right? As you can see, I am not on broadcast television here. All right. Coder for 100. Yeah. There's always a smart one in the crowd, isn't there? Coder for 100. This HTML element is used for performing actions, not navigation. Your answer. I'm sorry, I heard a bunch of stuff there. What's your answer? What HTML element? Ding, 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 ding. Thank you. I was getting concerned. Which book would you like? Form design. All right. Even Steven. Thank you. All right, I guess I need to get back to the board so this way y'all know what categories we have. We have 4 books left. Raise the hands. Right there. Which category? General for 200. And the answer is, this type of disability impacts an individual's ability to see colors accurately. Ding, 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 ding. Which book would you like? Left for everyone. All right. Next question. Raise the hands. Who wants to play? Okay, I'll pick you. Which category? Design. Why would you want to pick design? Design for 300. You guys are going to make me forget which one has things here. Okay. 300. Oh, I guess I have to hit refresh to put in that last question we just put in. Yeah, there we go. And that one doesn't work. So, okay, let's see how fast I can get down here. 300 should be the last one. No, that's not it. 300.
300 doesn't have a question.
No, it does. It's just that in the rush to try to get this ready, I forgot to put the ID in. Coder for 200. You're brave. This is the way you create a semantic numeric list. I'm sorry? Congratulations. Which book would you like? Which one?
Yeah, the accessible forms, because clearly I really like this.
I thought of you when I asked about it. All right, raise your hands. Who else wants to play? We have 2 more books, 1 of each. Raise your hands. Right here. Okay. General. Okay. So, see, this is where that whole skipping in the levels really fails me. And of course, I put the visited link thinking it would help. Of course, now it hurts. Which general, does anyone know which general we did before? 200, so we'll do 100, hopefully. Perceivable, operable, understandable, robust. What's the question? You're gonna make me hum this, aren't you? You forgot? You can. What did they say on? So yeah, phone a friend. Well, phone an audience member. Yeah. Can you see? Yes, I'll accept it. I'll collect call. So, does anyone have a helpful hint for the hints were WTC?
I thought it was no, I think
You're, he's saying WCAG. So, were you there when I did those very lengthy boring presentations?
I know, it's been a while.
So maybe they are, when you were in school, grammar school, the main guy, the CEO of the school was the not the students, not the teachers, not the dean, but the, I am giving a good hint, right?
I'm sorry.
Ding, 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 ding. on that one. Which book would you like?
I think let's do design form. Sorry.
Design for it? Okay. Last question, I think, because of course I can't tell now. Raise the hands. Right there. I would say which one, but I can't tell now which. Best laid plans, okay?
Whichever one you have left.
Whichever one I have left. Okay, so first off, I need to stop the live stream. Thank you.